All right. I'm so pleased you knew that song. It actually blew me away when I was at the Year 6 dinner dance and they knew every single word to that song. That was the song when I was your age, which makes me sound really old. Right. It is the final assembly of the year, and it's the first time we've been in person in 2 years. Isn't that crazy? It's been a long time. So thank you, Year 2, Year 6, and Year 4 for coming down here. The rest of you, you are online, and I really hope to see you in here next time. Fingers crossed, hey. Right, today we're going to celebrate and look at 60 years of St. Chris, a dance through the decades. Yes. I'm going to be challenging some of our amazing teachers to follow a just dance from the 1960s all the way through to the 2000s. And people in the classrooms, you are going to be able to vote on the teacher that you like the best as a dancer. Now, it doesn't need to be that they are the best. It just means that you like them. And then that teacher is going to come forward and teach us all a move from that decade. By the end of this assembly, we will have made St. Chris history just by learning and performing a dance from 1960 right the way through to the 2000s. How exciting is that? Yes. All right. Now, before we actually get going, I just need to make sure my first lot of dancers are in the junior hall. So I need Mrs. Asquith, Mrs. Reed, Mrs. McLaughlin, Mrs. Cocker, and Mrs. Dickinson to make their way to the junior hall if you're not already here, while we travel back in time and take a look at the 1960s. Oh, are we now? Are you sure? All right, fingers crossed. Let's go for it. Let's head back in time to the 1960s. Yes. Oh, breathe. So Yuri Gagarin was the first person in space in 1961. And the Beatles. Everyone went crazy for the Beatles in 1962. This is London. Look, they all want to touch the Beatles. And I'm sure a lot of people in this room know what's going on here. England wins the World Cup. Neil Armstrong walks on the moon in 1969. And this is what the dance looked like. All right, so that is what the world looked like. Let's have a look at what St. Christopher's looked like. So St. Christopher's started off as a church school, and it was only because the vicar's wife wanted a badminton court. She wanted a hall with a badminton court. And that's where it all began. Isn't that crazy? So basically, as all the companies were bringing all their families to Bahrain, they needed somewhere to go to school. They needed to send their children to school. And it was because they had a big enough hall to fit the first children into the school, which was 39 children on April 1961. By 1963, there was 120 children going to the school. I can tell you that today there are 1,185 children in the primary school. That's infant and junior. That's massive since 1963, isn't it? But also, they didn't have a senior school back then. So if we add the senior school to that as well, there's actually 2,328 children in the infant, junior, and senior school right now, 60 years later. Isn't that mad? I think so. I know. Now, as we go along, we will be saying some goodbyes to some of the teachers. And the first person we're going to say goodbye to is Mrs. Dales. Now, Mrs. Dales has been at school for 8 years, teaching us art and doing an amazing job at it. And this is what she looked like in the 1960s. Very cute. And actually, if you've met her son, he looks exactly like her. So we wish Mrs. Dales the best of luck in her new adventures in Canada. Right, this is where I'm going to call on our first dancers. So, can I ask Mrs. Asquith, Mrs. Reed, Mrs. McLaughlin, Mrs. Cocker, and Mrs. Dickinson to make their way to the stage, please? Here they come. Give them a cheer. Yes. Oh, look at that. Nice. Some have got there's some crosses there. There's some crosses on the floor, so you know where to stand. Go to a cross on the floor, Mrs. Cocker. There we go. All right, now look at that. They are going to transport us back to the 1960s and show us what dancing looks like. No pressure. No pressure. All right then, let's have a look. Are you ready? Oh, by the way, people in the classrooms, don't forget to look out for the person that you would like to teach us a dance move from the 1960s. Here it comes. Oh, yeah. 1, 2, 3. Woo. Excellent.
So good, so good. I got you.
Oh, yeah. Give them a round of applause. Yes, very well done. Straight back to the 1960s there. And it is time for you in the classrooms to vote using Mentimeter and see which person you would like to teach us our first dance move from the 60s. Can we see it? No? Okay, hang on. Can I see it? Oh, it looks like, oh, it's very close. But you know what? It's Mrs. Reed. Mrs. Reed has got the most votes there. And she looks very 1960s. So thank you very much, the rest of you. You can stay there or you can come down from the stage as we go and learn our first. I'll come up there, Mrs. Reed. Right, so now what we need is everyone in the classrooms to stand up and everyone here to stand up. Right, just stand, don't go anywhere, just stand. And we are going to learn our first 1960s move. Are you ready, Mrs. Reed? The only problem is, Mrs. Reed, we can't copy that. We have to copy that because that's going the right way, just to confuse things. Here we go. All right, are you ready, Mrs. Reed, coming in?
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
It's slightly different. Here we go. Give it a shake. Easy.
Twist and it goes like this. Come on, let's twist again.
Oh, yeah, we're looking great. Woo! Give Mrs. Reed a massive applause. Well done, you guys. You were incredible. Thank you, Mrs. Reed. Amazing. Amazing. Oh, fantastic. So that is our first move for the 1960s. Try and remember it. Thank you, Mrs. Reed. Okay, let's now head into the 1970s. And just before we go down that route, I need Mrs. Dales, Mrs. Wahel, Mrs. Fontanetti, and Mrs. Marshall to come down to the junior hall, please. Oh, yes, we're excited. Right, let's have a look at what the 70s had in store. But no, I can't see that. That's not there. Sony Walkman revolutionized how people listen to music. Everyone wanted one of these. And this is what the dance looked like. This is what our dancers are going to look like in a minute. Bit of John Travolta. Oh, yes. Right. Let's have a look at what St. Christopher's looked like then. So by 1973, there were 530 children attending the school, and a new primary school opened in Badea. And this is in 1976. Looks pretty different to our school now, right? Very different. Let's have a look at the classrooms then. This is what you would have been like in the 1970s. And look at that, there's a blackboard. They didn't have the big screens or the touch screens. They didn't even have a whiteboard with a pen. They didn't even have that. They just had chalk and a blackboard. Isn't that mad? Right, this is what the computers look like. And look at the size of the dials on that. Honestly, look at the size of the keyboard. And the playgrounds look very different too. In the 1970s, doesn't look so much fun, does it? But if we have a closer look, fashion was the same. It's now very fashionable to wear wide leg trousers. So that teacher was bang on trend for the 2000s as well. In 2008, this is the year that I came to the school. And look at the playground there. Looks different to now, right? Because now it looks like that. You're fenced in now. You can't just go on it whenever you feel like it. Right, I think you might like the next one. In the 1970s, PE was in your pants. Nobody had a PE uniform. It was just take your clothes off and keep your pants on. We're doing PE now. Would you like that? Honestly, crazy. And when you played football, to know whose team you're on, there's no bibs. Just one team had to take their top off, and the other team kept their top on. That's a weird way of making sure you know who's on your team. And gymnastics displays were outside. Look at that. Jumping onto concrete. Can you imagine doing forward rolls on concrete? I think that would actually really hurt. Right, it's time to say goodbye to some more teachers now. Here we have Mrs. McKellar, who's been a year with us, working with Mr. Wilkins and Mrs. Dales, and that's what she looked like in the 1970s. We wish her the best of luck. And Mrs. Kruger. Mrs. Kruger's been here 15 years. We gave her a massive clap earlier on down the corridors, and she's actually done a lot of roles in our school over the years. And right now, she sits in front of Mr. Fellow's office. Not because she's really naughty, but just because that is where mission control is. She runs the school from that desk in front of Mr. Fellow's office, and we're very, very, very sad to see her go. If you look there, she's got a lovely poncho in the 70s and lovely long socks, but I've seen people wear long socks now, so I guess they're back in fashion as well, Mrs. Kruger, but you didn't know that. Right, we also say goodbye to Mrs. Thomas. This is what she looked like in the 1970s. And she's been with us for 13 years. And she's not only just taught in the junior school, she's also taught in the infant school as well. And we're going to see a little bit of that later on. We wish Mrs. Thomas the best of luck. I'm sure that she's going to miss 3A as much as 3A are going to miss her. Right, and of course, Mr. Dales. Mr. Dales has been in the PE department for 8 years, teaching infants and juniors everything he knows. I don't know why that's taken 8 years, mind you, but he is always smiling, as he is when he was in the 1970s. Even when I ask him to dress up, he always says, "Oh, yes, please, Miss Lambert, what do you want me to be next?" He's so excited to be Mr. Rabbit. He's been Fat Elvis. He's been the turkey, and he's been a very naughty elf, in case you didn't know who. All right, Mr. Dales, good luck to all of those people as they leave St. Christopher's today. Right, it's time to do some dancing. Let's have Mrs. Dales, Mrs. Whale, Mrs. Fontanetti, and Mrs. Marshall. Look at them. Amazing. I didn't recognize you, Mrs. Dales. Oh, wow. Now, what they're wearing, who's heard of ABBA? Dancing Queen? This is them. Turn around, please. Let's see. Look. These are the people from ABBA. They've come dressed as 1970s ABBA. I love your trousers, Mrs. Whale. Nice. Right, are we ready to watch them dance? Don't forget, in the classrooms, you are going to use Mentimeter to decide who is going to teach us our next move. Here it comes. Get ready. Yes. Yes. Give her a round of applause. That was amazing. And you look fantastic. Right, it's time for you to vote on Mentimeter. I'm sorry you guys can't see it in here. I'm just going to go and see how it's working. Oh, there's a clear favourite. Oh, it's close, actually. It's going up, it's going up, it's going up. But Mrs. Dales, it is you. Yes. Right, thank you very much to everyone else. You were incredible. Right, Mrs. Dales, we're actually going to have somebody else with us. Ram, where are you? Ram, come on down. We gave Ram a clap earlier. Ram, you said you would. Get over here. We should get Bron as well. Do you know what? Bronwyn, come here as well. Bronwyn, Mrs. Kruger, I can see you behind there. I promise you it's simple. Come on. It's simple, I promise. I promise it's simple. There's no music to this one. I promise you it's simple. I promise. I know I normally never put anyone on the spot, but I'm sorry, I did put you on the spot there. No, we are not. We're doing that. Right, guys, everyone stand up and stand up in the classrooms as well. Everyone stand up. Now, all we've got to do is put one hand on our hip. Yeah, right hand on your hip, left hand on your hip, left hand on your hip. Right, left hand on your hip, or right hand for you lot, actually. Arm up. All we're going to do is go down and up and down and up and down. And that is our Staying Alive movement. And that is what we do straight after a 1960s movement. How cool is that? Easy, yeah? Right, we've nailed 1960s and 1970s. Give these guys a massive clap. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right. Time to head into the 1980s. Oh, yes. And for the 1980s, our dancers are Mrs. Jardine, Mrs. Maligue, Mrs. Perkins, Mr. Richards, and Mr. Fellows. If you can make your way to the Junior Hall, we will need you in just a second. First of all, stay there, stay there. First of all, let's have a look at what the 1980s look like. Pac-Man, fantastic game. No more tapes, it was all CDs. First mobile phone, look how chunky that is. And the record of Titanic is found in 1985. Nintendo Game Boy looked very different to your Nintendo Switches, but the music was amazing.
It's an orchestra of angels, and you're playing with my heart, yeah.
Come on, you know this one.
Push it real good.
I love a bit of pepper. Come on, year 6.
Pump up the jam, pump it up while your feet are stumping. And the jam is pumping. Look ahead, the crowd is jumping.
Oh, such a fantastic decade for music. So we're going to have a look at, first of all, we're going to look at the hairstyles of St. Chris. So back in the 80s, everybody had a Princess Diana haircut. Here she is. Now, Princess Diana is the mother of Prince William and Prince Harry. And she and Prince Charles, who's in the foreground there, they actually came to St. Christopher's in 1986. This is them here at St. Christopher's visiting in 1986. And in case you didn't know, Princess Diana at the time was more famous than Justin Bieber and Beyonce. That's how much the paparazzi followed her. Right, let's have a look at some sports events. Now, the sports looked a bit different because look at that track. There was no track. It was just a bit of chalk that was marked down. Now, you may think that looks like, yeah, it's the 1980s. That was ages ago. We were still doing that when I came here in 2008. So I know, no tracks. You're very lucky to have a track, guys. And look at the logo. Can you see the guy at the front? His logo. That's the St. Christopher's logo back then. Very different to now. Computers looked a bit different. The screens got smaller, but the keyboard has got bigger. And it looks like they're playing Space Invaders on that other one. And is it possible? Could it be that St. Christopher's invented the floss in the 1980s? It could be possible, you know. Not only that, you see that staging? We think that's the staging we still use for Health and Fitness Week right now. It's highly possible. Right, it's time to say some more goodbyes. And we're going to say, first of all, goodbye to Mrs. Dare, who's been here for 2 years at St. Christopher's. This is what she looked like in the 1980s. A lovely haircut. So we wish her the best of luck. Mrs. Cocker has been here 5 years at St. Christopher's. And this is what she looked like in the 1980s. Always smiling, Mrs. Cocker, even back then. And we've got these two. First of all, Mrs. Hegarty. Mrs. Hegarty has been here for 1 year teaching us swimming. And she looks very angelic in that photo there in the 80s. And Ram. Look at Ram. 1984. He looks so suave. Looks like a young Tom Selleck, I think. That big moustache. 40 years in Bahrain for Ram. 40 years. And he's been 17 years here at St. Christopher's. He's the guy that when we have all these special days, he, like, as if by magic, waves his magic wand and everything's cleared up in seconds. He just looks after us that well, and we're going to miss him loads. We're going to miss them all, and we wish them all the best of luck. It's time to do some dancing. Oh, yes. Let's welcome Mrs. Jardine, Mrs. Malik, Mrs. Perkins, Mr. Richards, and Mr. Fellows to the stage. Yes. Oh, yes. Don't forget, in your classrooms, look out for your favorite dancer. Oh, look how good they look. Straight back to the 1980s. Nice hair, Mr. Richards. Lovely. Right, they're transporting us to the 1980s. This is how we danced in the 1980s. Are you ready? Here it comes. Oh, yeah. In time. Fantastic. Bit of Rick Astley. Come on, guys. Yeah. Yay! Give them a round of applause. That was incredible. Like a 1980s band. Right, let's see what they're doing on Mentimeter. Ooh. Oh, look at that. It's changing every second here. But it looks like it's Mrs. Perkins. Mrs. Perkins, who is dressed for the 1980s as well. Right, Mrs. Perkins. So thank you, everyone else. You're amazing. Mrs. Perkins is up there. I'm going to come and join her. Now, Mrs. Perkins, the only problem is we can't follow that. We have to follow that. And it's right hand first. Okay? Right hand first. Right. I'm coming up with you. Okay, everybody stand up. Let's get ready to learn our 80s move. It's okay. So it's right hand first, okay? Here we go. Yay! That's our 80s move. Big cheer for Mrs. Perkins, who is dressed straight out of the 80s. Amazing. Right, so we've got a 60s, a 70s, and 80s move. We need to get on into the 90s. And before we can dive in and see what was going on in the 90s, I need to make sure we have Mrs. Brandreth, Mr. Holness, Mr. Dales, and Mr. Ross in the room. Come on down. Oh, yes. Right. Let's see what the 1990s look like then. The most complete T-Rex was discovered and named Sue after the woman who found it. The internet is born, 1991. Harry Potter, the first book in 1997. And Google is founded in 1998 even. And this is what dance looked like. We're going to see a bit of this in a minute.
If there was a problem, yo, I'll solve it. Check out the hook while my DJ revolves it.
Oh, you know this one. All right. So that's what the 1990s looked like. So let's have a look at what St. Chris looked like. Basically, by this point, St. Christopher's had the infant school was down the road in Badea, but now the junior school was in Eastertown. So they're in two separate sites now. And that was by 1992. The playground doesn't look very exciting, does it? Much better here. Right, time to say some more goodbyes. First of all, to Mrs. Sahan, who's been with us for 4 years at St. Christopher's. Look how cool she was in the 1990s. Hat on backwards, even got the whole finger thing going on. Very cool. And we have Coach Dan. He's been here for 5 years at St. Christopher's. And look at his haircut. I think that buzz cut is incredibly popular at the moment. I bet he never knew that his buzz cut back in the 90s would make a comeback in the 2000s. And Mrs. Tierney. She's been a teacher at St. Christopher's for 5 years, but she actually went to St. Christopher's as well. This is when she was at St. Christopher's. And back then, they had 2 uniforms. They had one for the summer, which is what she's wearing, and they had a winter uniform. Mad, isn't it, having 2 uniforms? I'm not sure your parents would be so happy about that. Right, we wish them all the best of luck, and thank you for everything you have done. Time to get some dancing in. Let's have Mrs. Brandreth, Mr. Holness, Mr. Dales, and Mr. Ross to the stage, please. Give them a clap. Oh, yes, bucket hats. Straight out the 90s. Oh, you look so good. Just copy that screen. So Mr. Dales must have packed his shell suit because I know he had one. Right, are you ready, people? Remember, people in the classes, get looking to see who you want us to teach us our 90s move. Oh, Mr. Ross has got it. You know this one. Yes, give them a round of applause. There's our 90s. Right, get on the Mentimeter. Let's see who your favorite dancer was, who you would like to teach us our 90s move. Oh, there's actually quite a clear winner here. And it's Mr. Ross. Yes. All right, Mr. Ross, stay there. Now, Mr. Ross, we can't copy this because we have to go in the same direction as that. All right. Here we go then. Everyone needs to stand up. Stand up in your classrooms. Stand up in the hall. We are ready to learn our 90s move. Right, it's to the right first. To the right first.
You can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this. My.
Yo, VIP.
I got it.
Let's kick it.
Bend your knees.
Ice, baby. All right, stop.
This is where I go wrong. I think my timing might have been a bit out of it. Again. Yay! Well done to Mr. Ross. Thank you, Mr. Ross. Right, well done, guys. We have moves now from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. We just need to head into the 2000s. All right. Before we dive into the 2000s, we need to make sure we've got Mr. Goodwin, Mrs. Cragg, Mrs. Sison, and Mr. Green in the Junior Hall. Okay, let's have a look at what the 2000s look like. First YouTube 2005, iPhone 2007, and the iPad not until 2010. Instagram 2010. Burj Khalifa finished and becomes the tallest building in the world. And Justin Bieber becomes the youngest solo male to top the charts since 1963. Prince William marries. And look at that. Would you jump from the edge of space? Ooh. Did it. Gangnam Style. First YouTube video to get 1 billion views. And we had the Ice Bucket Challenge. This is Mrs. Malik's sons pouring ice over me. TikTok. I know you know all about that. And the bottle flip. Usain Bolt becomes the fastest person in the world in 2017. And Greta Thunberg makes a powerful speech at the UN Climate Change Summit. Of course, 2020 brought us COVID, but it also brought us a vaccine, which has helped us. And Queen Elizabeth II celebrates 70 years on the throne.
You would like a marmalade sandwich? I always eat one for emergencies.
So do I. I keep mine in here.
What?
This is what the dance looked like.
Can you Bernie Lane? Can you Bernie Lane? Hit the quad. I know when that hotline bling.
Juju on that beat. Juju on that beat.
Kiki, do you love me? Are you riding? Say you never ever leave.
Whoa, looking at my mommy, look at me. Oh, I'm killing it. Whoa.
Oh, dance looked very different, didn't it? Very different to the 1960s. I mean, I remember you lot with your TikTok dances every time we walked into any room and your bottle flipping. I also remember year 6 trying to teach me how to do the whoa. I still can't do it. And now, I remember you teaching me that when you were in year 4. Right, people. Let's have a look at what St. Chris looks like now then. So in 2005, this school that we are in right now opened. And that's what it looked like. You can see the difference. The trees have grown. This is what it looked like. The site before any building was happening in 2004. This was the school being built, and then the swimming pool. And notice there's no roof to the swimming pool. In 2005, the pool was filled, and we were teaching lessons out there. And I know, no roof. I know, crazy, right? It's very hot. And if you look closer, look at that. No, there's like no proper road. It's just a dirt track to get here. And sometimes on that dirt, you would see some camels. That's camels in front of the school. Of course, now you probably only see stray dogs. And back in 2005, only the junior school was here. There was no infant school here yet. And look, the staff room was actually where Mrs. Dickinson's office is. And Mrs. Schaefer there, who is at Mission Control, this is where Mrs. Kruger sits right now. All right, so mad how different it is. It's very lonely sitting there. The tiger turf looked like this. There's no track. I told you that, didn't I? No track. And look, there's no cage. There's not really any lines on there either. It's just concrete. And then in 2006, the infant school was built on the end of the junior school. And this was it being built. And that meant that in 2007, the infant school closed in Awali and they joined the SAR campus. Now, if we zoom in, there's a very young Mr. Fellows there. And if you also look, Mrs. Armstrong's there as well. And if any of you remember Mr. Tonks and Mrs. Nicol, there they were in 2007. The year 3 and 4 sports day look like this. And year 5 and 6 sports day look like this. Now, I remember when I got here in 2008, Mr. Holness and Mrs. Lodwig were talking about arranging for the chalk lines to come in. I didn't really know what they were talking about, but we saw back in the 80s, it's the same thing. A guy used to come in and put those chalk lines down just so we had a track to run on. And if we look closer, there's Mr. May and Mr. Holness back in 2007. Do they look any different? I don't know. And the swimming pool in 2010 was still outside. We didn't have a roof on that pool until 2013. This is the year 2 swimming gala. Look, we had red uniforms back then, no blue ones. And look at this. This is year 2 Merlin getting ready for their swimming. We've got Mrs. Thomas and her son at the front on the right there. In year 2, so when Mrs. Thomas was year 2, Ever the avid Merlin supporter. Go Merlin. Right, let's have a look, because recently we had nursery debut in the pool and year 2 had their inter-house swimming gala. Let's see how well we did.
I'm saying let's go. You're saying maybe. Let's find a disco. You're stuck at home being so lazy. Everybody's saying that I lost my mind, but I ain't never ever given up this time. 'Cause everybody knows that I've been on the grind, but I ain't never ever given up this time. No, this time. No, this time. No, 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 no. I've never ever given up this time.
Oh, well done, everyone. That was amazing. That was such a good day. And we look forward to doing that again next year. And we look forward to nursery joining reception next year. Right, now look at this. House assemblies look really different in 2011. And so did the sports hall. You remember now we've got a sports hall that's got a blue floor, but back then it was this color. And actually that was an infant sports day. The weather was so bad, we actually had to do the infant sports day in the hall, which was absolutely jam-packed. And here we have Mr. Brandreth and myself, because when we had house assemblies, we didn't have it all together. It was only Kestrel on their own and Merlin on their own. So this is me and Mr. Brandreth taking Kestrel. Mr. Brandreth is not aged. I mean, look at that. He looks exactly the same 11 years on. Crazy. Merlin was up at the swimming pool. That must have been pretty hot. And here we have Mrs. Syson and Mrs. Armstrong in the junior hall for Falcon. And Osprey was in the infant hall. But look at this. There was no big screen. There was no Apple TV. It was just a little projector. And guess what? Mrs. Malik was not Merlin. She was in Osprey back then. Oh, Mrs. Malik. Also, the inter-house sports looked really different back then. We had to have them at break time. And this is actually the cage. And you can see the staff car park was at the back of the cage. And there was no roof on the cage. In fact, there was no tiger turf on the cage until August of that year, 2011. Still no roof until 2014. And we have a very pregnant Mrs. Lodwig in the background there. Right, now, if you think that's what inter-house sports look like, we this year have made history. You have all been part of making St. Chris history, because this year we had the very first Ultimate House Week. That's not going away. So you guys were the first ones to ever do it. Let's see how you did.
We're moving through the night like we're from a different star, flying over streets and our broken hearts. But they can't even touch us, we found a different beat. Paradise is waiting and we got the lead. Oh, getting caught in the maze, there's so many that never get out. They're feeding the fears and the doubts. Ooh, but we go and we run to the end and we run without shame. We own the game. And we run on the flames till the morning light. Baby, cause we're dynamite. Ain't nobody gonna hold us down. Please call the blues, let them run and hide. Baby, cause we're dynamite. Gonna let the world know. We're from a different time, yeah, we're of a different breed. Cause what we got is timeless, we supersede. And we holding the key, yeah, we're tired as can be. We're rolling, just like a key. Oh, getting caught in the mist, there's so many that never get out. We're feeding the fears of the doubt. Ooh, but we're gonna run to the end and we'll run without shame. We own the game. And we ride on the flames till the morning light. Baby, cause we're dynamite. Ain't nobody gonna hold us down. Break all the rules, let them run and hide. Baby, cause we're dynamite. Gonna let the world know. Gonna let the world know.
You're like a circle that floats around me, keeping me safe and sound. And when I fall, you tied a rope to me. You're blessing me every day. I was down with an illusion, like a sparrow with broken wings. But now I shine with your reflection on me. I'm getting back up on my feet. That you showed up was written in my palm. You are a statement, explode like a bomb. I get to push myself to victory. You make me winner. You cut me loose and set me free. You make me winner in every way. You showed me how to spread my wings. Yes, I'm the winner of the day. You cut me loose and set me free. You make me win in every way. You showed me how to spread my wings. Yes, I'm the winner of the day. Yes, I'm the winner. Yes, I'm the winner. Am I awake or am I dreaming? So far gone, I won't look back. And when I move, there ain't no stopping me. You're pushing me up to the top. I saw the clouds looking angry, but then the sky reached my mind. And when I space out, I see the possibilities unfolding the way that I want. That you showed up was written in my palm. You are a statement, explode like a bomb. I get to push myself to victory. You make me winner. You cut me loose and set me free. You make me
Very good. Well done, everybody. That was a fantastic week, and we can't wait to do that again next year. So it is time to invite down our last set of dancers and learn our last move before we put it all together. So let's have Mr. Goodwin, Mrs. Cragg, Mrs. Syson, and Mr. Green to the stage, please. Give them a cheer, they come. Oh, yes. Fantastic. All right, as they get themselves positioned. What's going on there? Right, so remember, in the classrooms, vote for the person who's going to teach us our final moves. Are you ready? Here it comes. Tricky, these ones. I think you guys are going to know these moves.
Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth.
Oh, Mr. Goodwin's good.
Let's go to work. 2 hops this time. 2 hops this time. Right foot, 2 stumps. Left foot, 2 stumps. Hands on your knees. Hands on your knees. Get funky with it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Oppan Gangnam Style.
Mrs. Syson's favourite move. Oh, Mr. Goodwin's got it down. Give them a round of applause. All right, let's see. Let's see who has won that one. Ooh. Oh, it's going up. It's changing. It's changing. Oh my god. Oh, it's changing. It's very. Oh, it's a tie. It's a tie. It's a tie. Is it a tie? Oh no, it's not. It's not a tie anymore. Mr. Goodwin, you are our winner. Fantastic. Now, Mr. Goodwin is going to teach us our final moves. The only thing is, Mr. Goodwin, we can't copy this. We have to do it from there because it's a mirror. It's the opposite of what that is. No. All right, here we go then. Our final move. Everyone stand up. Stand up in the classrooms.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof.
I wish it was just that.
If you feel like happiness is true.
It's not anymore.
Let's go to work. Right foot, 2 stumps. Left foot, 2 stumps. Hands on your knees, hands on your knees. Get funky with it. Oh, yeah. Come on.
Open Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Open Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Open Gangnam Style.
Oh, that's not it. We've not finished. You know what it is.
Now watch me whip. Now watch me nay-nay. Okay. Now watch me whip. Watch me nay-nay. Why me do it? Now watch me whip. Watch me nay-nay. Okay. Now watch me whip. Watch me nay-nay. Can you do it? Now watch me.
They know what is what, but they don't know what is what.
Here we go. You know it.
Can't touch this.
Get ready for the dab. Hold it. That's our finished position. Give yourself a clap. Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Brilliant. Right. Now then, don't sit down just yet. Because now, oh, I need to go back here for the camera. Right now, it is time to put everything together. We are going to dance from the time St. Christopher's opened in 1961 all the way through to now. We know the moves. We're going to put it all together. We're going to make St. Chris history right now. Everybody stand up. Stand up in the classrooms. We've got this. Oh, I'm not going. I'm going to sing. Here we go. Are you ready? Here it comes.
One, two, three. All right. Got to know how to hold it. Like on him rolling. Mashed potato. Do the alligator. We're gonna do the twist and it goes like this. Come on, let's twist again. Like we did last summer. Yeah, let's twist again. Like we did last year. We remember when we laughed. Yeah, let's twist again. Wish the time is here. Stay in the line, stay in the line. Stay in the line.
I'm coming for your love again. Take on me. Take on me. Take me on. Take on me. I'll be gone.
this. Can't touch this. My.
Yo, VIP. Let's kick it.
Ice, baby. Ice, baby.
All right, stop.
Dala tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, que tu cuerpo es para dar la alegría y cosas buenas. Dala tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, Macarena. Dala tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, que tu cuerpo es para dar la alegría y cosas buenas. Dala tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, Macarena.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth.
Let's go to work. Right foot, 2 stumps. Left foot, 2 stumps. Hands on your knees, hands on your knees. Get funky with it. Oh, yeah. Come on.
Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Oppan Gangnam Style.
You already know what it is. Now watch me whip. Kill it. Now watch me nay nay. Okay. Now watch me whip. Watch me nay nay. Why me do it? Now watch me whip. Kill it. Watch me nay nay. Okay. Now watch me whip. Watch me nay nay. Can you do it? Now watch me.
They know what is what, but they don't know what is what.
Swish, swish, swish. Another one in the basket. Can't touch this. Another one in the casket.
Hold it. Yeah, give yourselves a clap. That was amazing. Oh, you look so good. I bet you looked amazing in the classrooms as well. Fantastic. That's the first time ever St. Chris have learned a dance and performed a dance all on the same assembly. Well done, everybody. Woo. It's coming up next. Right, now then. It's time to find out our house points. You guys have worked so hard over the year. You've scored so many points. It's actually really tricky every week for the teachers to actually count all your house points. So we've got the results in. Please remember, it doesn't matter if your house ends up winning. It matters that you guys have put in the effort all year round, and effort pays off. So well done. Let's have a look. Here it comes. Oh, nearly saw a little bit of it then. That's a lot of points. 22,639. 22,538. 22,705. 22,817. Well done, everybody. So, well done to Kestrel. But remember, well done to everyone, because you've all earned those house points all year round. You've all done fantastically well. And don't forget, you can earn some house points today. Take your house t-shirts with you on holiday in 45 minutes and you can earn some house points straight away, ready for September. Now, guys, listen, I cannot end this assembly without mentioning Matilda. Congratulations to everyone who was in the Matilda performance. It was absolutely fabulous to have the school back on stage. Absolutely brilliant. We've been waiting for so long for that. And Matilda got up to a couple of naughty things at times. I just wanted to tell you that sometimes everybody can be a little bit naughty. because recently there was nobody in charge of the school. Nobody. Mrs. Dickinson was away. Mr. Fellows was away. Mission Control, Mrs. Kruger was away. Mrs. Williams was away. Mr. Jones was away. Mrs. Dawson was away. Everyone was away. It was just the teachers. And I went walking down into that area, and this is what I saw. Some naughty teachers in there. What's Mrs. Vanderlist doing to those faces? There's Mission Control. Who would ever leave Mr. Mannings in control? Naughty, naughty teachers. Well, there we have it. Looks like some teachers are going to be told off when they get back to their classes. Right. Anyway, well done, everybody. That is it. That's the end of our assembly. A massive thank you to the teachers and best of luck for everybody who's leaving. And best of luck to all of you, Year 6 going into Year 7. I'm sure we're all going to miss you around the school as well. Don't forget your house T-shirts. And don't forget that if you see any teachers or Ram or Mrs. Kruger or Mr. and Mrs. Dales or any of the other leavers, please make sure that you say thank you. Oh no, I think I'm in trouble. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Stand up, Eden. Our technical man. Mrs. Long with my photographer. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Have an amazing holiday. I'm going to get those 80s tunes back on. I already know which song is coming on. I already know it. I know it. Because you were singing to it earlier. Here it comes. Yes.
We're no strangers to love. You know the rules, and so do I. I've full commitments what I'm thinking of. You wouldn't get this from any other guy. I just want to tell you how I'm feeling. Gotta make you understand. Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down. Never gonna run around and desert you. Never gonna make you cry. Never gonna say goodbye. Never gonna tell a lie and hurt you. We've known each other for so long. Your heart's been aching, but you're too shy to say it. Inside we both know what's been going on. We know the game and we're gonna play it. And if you ask me how I'm feeling, blind to see. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around and desert you. Never gonna make you cry, never gonna say goodbye, never gonna tell a lie and hurt you. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around and desert you. Never gonna make you cry, never gonna say goodbye, never gonna tell a lie and hurt you. Never gonna give